Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Adina Phillips, and I'm a board member of Israel Policy Forum, and I'm the co-founder of IPF Atid, Israel Policy Forum's young professional program. We're really lucky to be joined today by leading voices from our community representing super critical, relevant perspectives on today's topic. So I'll first just welcome our panelists, Rabbi Rick Jacobs, the president of the Union for Reform Judaism, Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of ADL, Sheila Katz, the CEO of the National Council on Jewish Women. And Sheila, I want to congratulate you. I know you just completed your first year in that role, and we're excited to have a leading voice of the next generation with us on this call. And last but not least, we're joined by Richard Sandler, a longtime communal leader who most recently served as chair of the JFNA, the Jewish Federations of North America, but joined us in this conversation in his personal capacity as an experienced and dedicated leader who's held many leadership roles in our community. So thank you all for being part of this conversation. And I'm going to jump right in. I want to start by naming that the past 2 decades have seen numerous moments that have tested the American Jewish community's relationship and commitment to Israel. But this moment feels like a turning point. We have the issue of annexation being put forward as the sole issue embedded in the coalition agreement undergirding the new Israeli government. We have alarm bells from all around the world, a public appeal from the government of the UAE directed at the Israeli people. Just a few days ago, King Abdullah held a briefing with members of Congress, warning about severe regional instability. We have former Israeli officials who are not traditionally associated with the two-state, being pro-two-state, raising alarm about this moment. So we have all these signposts indicating that this is a pivotal moment, perhaps unprecedented. And I want to start by asking the age-old Jewish question, why is this night different from all other nights? Or is this night different from all other nights? Are we at a pivotal moment? Are we at a turning point in Israel's story? And of course, in this conversation, we're turning our attention to the impact of this issue in our community here, in the American Jewish community. So each of you is leading or has led a major national institution with deep roots in the American Jewish experience, deep experience in the relationship between American Jews and Israel. And I would love to hear every one of you comment on this question. Is this a pivotal moment? And if it is, why? Rabbi Rick, we'll go to you first.
Well, thank you, Adina, and it's great to be with my colleagues and for this really important conversation. I actually think this is a different moment. It's not the first time there's a serious policy disagreement between the United States and Israel, because it may in fact be just that, or between the majority of American Jews and Israel. There have been many issues. But this is a moment where the issue before us of annexation would not be a disagreement. It literally will foreclose the most critical piece of Israel's very heart and soul, which is the Jewish democratic state. It is that Jewish democratic state that I know the overwhelming majority of our reform movement feel just entirely committed to and supportive of, even when there's a small disagreement or a large disagreement. This is basically something that cuts to the very heart. And what is clear is this is not going to be just a decision that is taken, if it is, and we're going to do everything possible to stop any possible annexation. But what it would do is foreclose, not temporarily, not for a finite period of time. It would foreclose the future of the two states for two peoples solution, which has been and remains the only way to keep Israel both Jewish and democratic, to preserve the human rights and civil rights of Palestinians. And we're not near to that moment, but this decision would literally say, not hold on, but that future is off the table. That's what's different. That's what's extraordinarily important, and that's why so many of us are raising our collective voices to oppose the unilateral annexation.
Great, thank you. Jonathan?
Adina, thank you for the question. It's a pleasure for me to be here on this panel with so many friends and wise voices, and I think you just heard wisdom from Rabbi Jacobs. I think from my point of view, how and why this moment might be different depends on what action is actually taken. So at the ADL, we are stalwart supporters of a two-state solution. We think we need to recognize the intertangled nature of the fate of the Israeli and Palestinian people, and that we need both an outcome that creates a safe and secure democratic and Jewish state of Israel alongside a Palestinian state that provides the dignity and equality that the Palestinian people themselves deserve. And so as we think about this moment, and is it different, I think we have to see again what action is actually taken. So a maximalist, irreversible move by the Israeli government will have major reverberations and repercussions for the Jewish state and across the region. A more symbolic move that doesn't impact the Palestinians directly and perhaps serves to assuage Bibi's right flank, that might have a more muted impact. I mean, we've maintained at the ADL for years that the issue of West Bank settlements, those within the main settlement blocks or those outside the security barrier, should be decided as part of final status negotiations between the two parties. Annexation simply changes that equation. It means that Israel is unilaterally deciding that what it annexes is now officially part of the Jewish state. And it removes settlements as an issue for negotiation and sends a clear message to the Palestinian people that the two-state solution is no longer the preferred outcome to the conflict. And, you know, for this and other reasons, annexation will absolutely create challenges and tensions as it relates to the different segments of the Jewish population here in the United States, and I think across the diaspora, let alone for America and Israel and for other countries in Israel. If Israel moves ahead with it and appears to abandon the two-state solution, it will likely exacerbate the dynamics we've been seeing play out for some period of time, with US Jews, particularly younger Jews, distancing themselves from Israel. And it'll become that much harder to defend Israel in centrist and progressive spaces, including on college campuses and among more leaning political circles. Now, I say this as someone who has spent a lot of time and as an organization that is proudly and unapologetically Zionist. And we have been very active in calling out the delegitimization of Israel. We have been very fierce about countering BDS campaigns. We have not hesitated to call anti-Zionism what it is, which is anti-Semitism. But annexation will be used by Israel's detractors to delegitimize it, especially again in these progressive spaces where we've been working so hard. And I worry a great deal, not just with the UN and the ICC. I don't really, I mean, those are concerns, but I'm particularly concerned about not the International Criminal Court, but the court of public opinion, especially as it relates to young people in this country. And in the United States, in this moment, when we're collectively going through this moment of sort of racial reckoning, Israel will be painted as akin to an ethno-nationalist country, which continues to oppress and subjugate the Palestinians. Jewish communities around the world in diaspora, in Europe, in South America, in South Africa, here in the United States, I think we will pay a special price as we are often held responsible for Israeli actions and policies. And I will note that this move will likely become a wedge issue in the US presidential campaign. You can fully expect that Israel's detractors, as well as people just committed to justice, are going to raise it. And you know, Democratic hopeful Joe Biden has cautioned against such action, as have numerous Democratic members of Congress. It could serve to undermine the bipartisan consensus on the Hill around Israel and could pit Democrats who are largely opposed to annexation. It could pit them against Republicans who've been passive or supportive. And finally, as I kind of want to conclude here, Again, we believe in a two-state solution, and I do not think it's appropriate to take the Palestinians off the hook for the role that they need to play in realizing a peaceful outcome. For decades, for generations, Palestinian leadership has failed to seize opportunities. But Israel has always held, and I think appropriately, a position of moral leadership for trying again and again and again to reach a negotiated settlement. But as my friend Yossi Klein Halevi has written in recent days, if Israel moves forward with its annexation, they risk losing that moral high ground. They risk pulling back from this position of attempting to proactively tackle the problem. And I think that will be detrimental, again, in the court of public opinion today and for decades to come.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think you just gave us the map for the rest of the conversation. Lots of buzzwords that we're going to need to be double clicking on in the short time that we have. So I think we have a yes and a maybe to yes. Sheila, is this night different from all other nights?
Yeah, I'm a yes on this question, and I agree with a lot of what's been said, particularly the moral high ground part, Jonathan, that you just shared, and Rick about upholding Jewish and democratic and what that looks like. I guess I want to say this would have always been different, the way that I see it, but it needs naming that we're still in the middle of a global health pandemic, which does play a role in the timeline here and what's taking place. And we're also in the United States, at least white people for the first time, grappling with systemic racism and understanding what it means when there are peoples with less rights than other people in the same country. And I think both of those factors of coronavirus and the systemic racism that we're trying to understand and dismantle play a role in the way American Jews and Zionists are going to respond to unilateral annexation. And I can surely say that Americans are frustrated, and none more so than American Jews who love Israel and are proud Zionists. And we know that it is possible to be a proud American while also being critical of our government. And in the same way, American Jews know that we can still be critical of the actions taken by the government of Israel while still loving Israel. And this is something I just want to also name, that I don't think people, when they think of the National Council of Jewish Women, immediately think of unilateral annexation in Israel as a position that we might take. But the reality is our work is about helping vulnerable populations in the United States and Israel. And we've worked on the issue about violence against women since Israel was founded, first in helping children, Holocaust survivors, when they were coming into Israel, and then in founding the first ever gender studies department in the Middle East at Tel Aviv University, which our name is proudly on and are our great partners on the ground in Israel. And I've been speaking with them. Our partners who do Violence Against Women Act, who are Palestinian and Israeli, and I could say confidently that unilateral annexation would directly impact women, children, and families on the ground, creating fear, creating violence, creating less avenues for financial stability, and creating second-class citizens, which I guess I can't even say, creating non-citizens, really, because they'd be stripped of that right and wouldn't be able to vote. And for those people who have been engaged in a lot of protests lately, like me, there's a common chant when you go out and you protest and you say, this is what democracy looks like, right? You say it loud and proud. This is not what democracy looks like. And it is important to uphold the values of Israel being seen as a Jewish state and a democratic state. And this actually skews far too far away from the democracy side of the equation. And it is an imperfect balance always, but it is too far away from what's necessary to create safety. And so the decision to unilaterally annex the West Bank would create conflict and strife that ultimately will hurt the people who live in that region. And so, you know, we're against this strongly because of our mission, not in spite of it, not because this is outside of the scope of it, but because we care about the health and safety of women, children, and families. And this just goes too far into creating problems that, you know, are not going to even be able to be solved quickly or in a few years. This is a long-term detrimental decision that will impact people there. And as far as in the United States, what Jonathan was saying about Yossi Klein Halevi's argument, I just want to totally agree with that. We work in progressive spaces and are working with people constantly who are critical of Israel. And we are a Zionist organization, and we navigate these conversations on the regular. And one of the things that's been a guiding post for us that's been helpful in our conversations is that moral high ground argument around what it means that Israel shows up to the table, about what it means that we're willing to be in a two-state solution where there's a compromised, negotiated position. This takes away that argument in a way that's going to make it even harder in those spaces. And I do think will create certainly people who become anti-Zionist, certainly people who don't want to defend Israel. And I think we'll be in a moment where it will be difficult to defend these actions. We just can't. And so the last thing I want to say is the move towards two states is so critical. Unilateral annexation is not the answer. And as we work towards a two-state solution, I just have to say that women actually have to be a part of that conversation and represented as part of the path forward. The well-formulated UN proposal 1325, is something that we really, really believe in. And women peacemakers have played a role in so many other regions like Ireland and Liberia, and they should be playing a role in the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. So first, Palestinians have to be included, which is a problem not to include them. And second, as we look at who's showing up at the seat at the table, we need to make sure there's diversity as far as gender.
Great, thank you, Sheila. So Richard, you can round out the four answers to the big question.
Yeah, well, again, thank the Israel Policy Forum for doing this, and I appreciate all of you. I appreciate the views of my colleagues. I think they talked about a lot of the concerns. One way that today certainly is not different from past is we do live in a very politically charged world. We live in a world that unfortunately we're moving more and more to a point where people not only refuse to listen to those that have different points of view than they do, but they show disrespect and even animus to those people with different points of view. And one of the reasons that I respect and thank the Israel Policy Forum for doing sessions like this is I believe the IPF does have an interest in educating its followers that these issues are complex. And whether or not I may agree with every single policy decision of IPF or not, I do respect the fact that they approach it from at least a point of educating people as to what the issues are. And so I like to think that, we are we're trying to do something different than is done in our community quite a bit and try to have a discussion sort of in the spirit of Hillel and Shammai and not with respect to all the rancor that we see so often. A way in which this is a different time for Israel, and some of my colleagues here have alluded to it, is Israel today has improving and better relationships with its Gulf Arab country neighbors than it ever has before, to the point where the U.S. ambassadors from the UAE and Oman and Bahrain accepted invitations to be at the White House with the Prime Minister of Israel for the unveiling and releasing of the Vision for Peace plan. And I would certainly hope, quite frankly, that this is not a seminal moment in our relationship with Israel. As American Jews, I'd hope that we can all appreciate and focus more on what we have in common and how important the state of Israel is to us. The fact there is a state of Israel, a Jewish state in our ancestral homeland, is a dream that all of our ancestors had for over 2,000 years, and a dream that just became realized back in 1948. And we should be proud of the fact that Israel is a democracy. It's a different democracy than the US democracy. It's a parliamentary democracy. It's also a democracy that has been at war every single day of its 72 years. But Israel still has free and open elections. It has a vigorous and free press, and they elect their leaders. And their leaders are hopefully represent the people of the state of Israel. We all know our Israeli brothers, I don't know if we all know, sure everybody on this panel certainly knows that our Israeli brothers and sisters experience day-to-day life and experience Jewish life very different than American Jews do. Israelis send their children into the army to defend their country, and their kids are defending us when they are in those armies every day. Israel has a seat at the world table because Israel exists. The Jewish people have a seat at the world table. We've never had that before. So if Israelis elected leaders make a decision to assert Israeli civil law and administration over Israelis living in the West Bank to any extent, as long as they still show a commitment to the plan, as long as they still show a commitment to being willing to sit down with their Palestinian neighbors, as long as they show a commitment to the two-state solution, which the plan calls for, and as long as they show a commitment to the requirement of no more settlements in at least 70% of the West Bank for the next 4 years, I would hope that American Jewry can respect that. We don't have to agree with that decision, whatever the decision is. But if we allow that decision to adversely affect our relationship with Israel, let alone to be a turning point in that relationship, to me, that would be a tragedy. And that would be a victory for the many, many enemies we have out there who are committed to the destruction of the state of Israel and, quite frankly, to harm to the Jewish people. So yes, it may be a different type of decision we're talking about, but it is not a different moment. It should not be with respect to our relationship with the state of Israel. I do not believe whatever decision's made, without even expressing an opinion on what decision I would like to see made or not being made. It's a complex issue. The leaders know the complexity, but whatever decision is made, I do not believe it will change the fact that Israel is a democracy, and I do not believe it will foreclose the opportunity for a two-state solution.
Thank you. So we have a yes, no, and a maybe, but interesting that even the yes and the no both hinge on the centrality of the two-state solution to this conversation. I want to go back to one of the breadcrumbs that Jonathan dropped about young leadership, next generation, college campus. Of course, we are all wondering and talking about how this shifts the discourse for the next generation of young American Jews and their connection to Israel. And I'll put the question to you, Sheila, first. You spent 12 years at Hillel and were the youngest VP there and have been such an outspoken voice for Next Gen. So you share your thoughts with us, and then of course all three other panelists organizations are engaged in young leadership. So if anyone else wants to jump in.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be good for young Jews on college campus and elsewhere as they're thinking and developing their relationship with Israel. One of the things we learned a lot while working with younger people is that they're not always starting from a place of loving Israel to begin with. A lot of older generations tend to just be wired that way. And oftentimes the younger generation, they're moving from their head to their heart, right? To really theoretically understanding Israel as a homeland and Israel as a place for them and a place that they could love. But that motion to the heart is actually really important for people to build that. And we're also in a moment where travel to Israel is going to be significantly less. And I don't know how this will impact whether people can go on birthright trips, among other study abroad programs long term, but we have to also, hold that a whole generation who normally gets to understand the love of Israel by visiting is also not going to be able to do that in the foreseeable future. So all of that to say is, I think it's going to be unilateral annexation for sure is going to cause a lot of people to question Israel, to question the government of Israel, to question why it is that they're told they should support Israel. And I do think it will help the BDS movement on the college campus for sure. We lose that moral high ground that's been spoken about already. And I think, we've already seen, it feels like as many cases of BDS on the college campus as you can imagine, but I do think this will increase as a result of it. And it will put Zionist students in really difficult positions to be able to talk about what it means to be supportive of Israel. And the best, advice, there's a lot of advice we can give to students in these moments. First is to be active in speaking out. Like, I'm a proud American and I disagree with my government here all the time. And one of the reasons I could still be a proud American citizen citizen here is because I'm exercising my right of citizenship, of being in a democratic state, and I'm taking action to make sure that I'm speaking up and speaking out wherever possible. Young people, students, they need to see all of us as leaders in the Jewish community doing that. They need to be encouraged to do that, and they need permission to be able to criticize the policies of the Israeli government without being attacked, which sometimes happens on the college campus. Like, it's like if you say one negative thing, it's all of a sudden you're anti-Zionist, and that's not what anti-Zionism is. And so I do think we need to hold space for students to navigate this, navigate the complexity. And I think we're gonna have a problem with BDS if unilateral annexation continues in this way. And so those are a few of my thoughts. I'm certainly curious what other people think, but you know, in sum, I think it's going to be worse. I think it's going to put Zionist students in a difficult position. And I think there's gonna be a lot of love and support we have to give to those students to get through this. But it's all the more important that they hear people like us on this call saying that this is a problem, because it normalizes the fact that we're able to do that and still be proud Zionists, which I certainly am.
So I'm actually going to layer another question onto that because we don't have a lot of time. And Sheila, you're taking us to the charge, the so what do we need to do? And so I'm just going to sort of pan out from there and come back to the theme of this whole program, which is responsible leadership. And what leaders, like the leaders on this call, but really throughout the community, need to do in this moment. People are going to be looking for guidance, are going to be asking questions about annexation, about Zionism, about the discourse. What should leaders be saying or doing right now? And potentially down the line in the wake of annexation? What do you see as your role and the role of our community leadership in general in this moment, and as we move into this phase? And I'll ask every panelist to respond briefly, and then unfortunately we'll have to close because there obviously is so much more that we'd like to be speaking about. Richard.
Well, if I might say something, Adina. I mean, I think it is incumbent upon the leaders of the community to speak honestly and openly about what's very obvious. The fact of the matter is, to build on what Sheila said, like, our young people are going to need support, and everyone in the proto community is going to need support, because this is going to put us in a position which is so contrary to, I don't know, 70 plus years of the stated position of the state itself. And when you think about it again, we can talk about the fact that the Palestinians have not presented a credible, let alone creative peace plan ever, and that they continue to promote a narrative of delegitimization at every turn. Like, these things are real, but we will not be able to have that conversation if annexation blots everything else out. And the notion that there would be two legal systems in place, one for Israeli citizens and one for the other people under Israeli jurisdiction. I mean, do I need to tell you what that sounds like? I just think we need creative, intelligent thinking. And we need to push for that on both sides. But we as American Jewish leaders have to be accountable to our constituency here and to Eretz Yisrael, which we all treasure. And so we need to say the danger of going down this road is significant. And I wish I agreed with what Richard said a few minutes ago. I think part of being Zionist, which I proudly am, kind of as Sheila said a moment ago, is talking about what's good and bad, where we can lean in and where we need to pull back, what should stay and remain the same, and what needs to change. And before we go down this road, I hope cooler heads will prevail, so we don't have to have that very awful conversation in the light of day in public.
Thank you. Richard, what does responsible communal leadership look like?
First of all, I thank Jonathan for bringing up the comment about what have the Palestinians done in the 25 years since Oslo, okay? And I think part of our responsibility as leaders in the community and our responsibility to young people, because we do put them in a difficult position, okay, when certain decisions get made and we have to try to explain those decisions. but we have to give them the tools so they can explain those decisions. So they should know that, you know, if Hood Barak made a unbelievable offer to the Palestinians after Oslo, that was not even responded to when Clinton was president. They should know that Olmert, even though he did not have that much backing from his own people, made an even more generous offer that wasn't responded to. And at the time of, at the end of the Obama administration, he had his principles, which though there were obviously disagreements between him and the Prime Minister Netanyahu said, yes, he was willing to come to the table with the Palestinians based on those principles, though he had reservations. And Abbas said, yes, I will get back to you. Let me get back to you. Okay, it's 2020 and he still hasn't gotten back to him. We also have a situation today where we have Hamas in Gaza, and we have the Palestinians with a pay-to-slave policy, where they pay people who kill Jews in Israel in terrorist activities. And they also teach their kids to hate Israel. So we have to arm our young people. I'm not saying it's easy for them, but they have to understand the entire picture of what's happening there. And regardless of what the decision may or may not be on annexation or how any of us feel about it, we still have issues with young people in our country and their Judaism. We are losing young people. We're losing them to Judaism. We have shrinking membership of synagogues, which I'm sure Rick is plenty aware of. We have shrinking attendance in Jewish day schools, at least in the non-Orthodox schools. And we have a problem, not because our young people don't care about their Judaism. We've done a very poor job of educating them, and they don't know. So I think our responsibility as responsible leaders is to make sure we educate the community on the complexity of the issues, on all the things that have led up to this, what the good is and what the bad is, what the problems are and why decisions are made. That we need to listen to each other, as I said before. We need to respect each other in different points of view. You know, a number of you on this panel, we've had many discussions over the years, and I've always really admired the fact that they've been done respectfully, and when we disagree, I have learned from you. Hopefully you've learned something from me. So we may come at it differently, but we're all trying to do the same thing. We all care about the Jewish people. We all believe that the Jewish tradition has given something to the world that's meaningful. And our responsibility to our young people is to teach them that, give them the tools that they need. That's what I hope we will continue doing.
Great, thank you. We have honesty, innovation, creativity, courage. Rabbi, what does responsible leadership look like in this moment?
Well, responsible leadership speaks up directly, honestly, and from for us, a very strong pro-Zionist argument. The argument against annexation is an argument for Israel. It's an argument for Israel's security. It's an argument for Israel's well-being. And by the way, I actually happen to believe that our young people have been well educated and they carry their commitments wherever they go. If they are on the streets of Minneapolis or Ferguson or anywhere else, they're carrying their Jewish commitments. And I am so proud to lead the largest Zionist movement in North America. Nothing makes me prouder. And we educate our young people about how Israel matters, how Israel is part of the very aorta of Jewish life, that we are connected deeply in all of the profound ways. We take so many young people to Israel so they can see with their own eyes. We bring so many Israelis to live in our communities and teach in our camps, in our youth movements. But here is the kicker, and we dare not ignore this at our peril. It's like saying, and I hear in Richard's comment, also I so regard Richard and have come to be close and have fought on the same team for a very long time, and I appreciate that. But to think that Jewish leadership are going to be able to share a few talking points and a new little framework if annexation goes through is like thinking that I'm going to stand outside during a hurricane with my umbrella and not get wet. It's not about what we're going to do if that comes to be. It's going to be so profound, and it's going to literally, I think, send tremors through our community. And to the people who every day are on the front lines. I very often am the person standing up in front of liberal Christians, of which there are millions. And the only way that you can win the argument for Israel, which I fight all the time on the college campuses, wherever I'm given a microphone, the case for Israel, the case for the Jewish state against those who would delegitimize Israel, the only winning argument against BDS and against the one state solutions on the left or the right, the one that ignores democracy and the one that ignores the Jewish, is to make a case for the two-state solution, which is not nearby. We know that. The conditions are not there. And yes, the Palestinians have not only missed opportunities, but have been in so many key ways undermining any possibility that that process will reignite at any time soon. But knowing that, I think the most responsible thing a Jewish leader can do in this moment is to speak so clearly to the levers that can actually be affected, which means the US government is part of this. It will be a decision, by the way, the Israeli cabinet is divided on this. That's also something that makes this very different. But the US has put a green light, or at least it sometimes goes yellow, then it goes green, then it goes yellow, but it's never been red in this current administration. And so our voices can actually make a difference. And to our elected officials, they need to hear that we love Israel, that we stand up for Israel every single day, and that annexation would be a tragic mistake. So we're in it for the long haul. Our love is deep, and it is not in any way for the fair-weathered Zionists. And yet, if any part of what is being contemplated, no one knows exactly what might be annexed or might be included in this extending of sovereignty, which is just another way to say annexation, but not say it. We will have such a monumental challenge with our Jewish community, not because they don't care, but because they do care.
Can I say something, Adina, to build on what Rabbi Jacobs just said?
You can do it in 30 seconds.
I think just as our community is engaging in intense discussion right now about annexation, what we're doing here and modeling decorum with different points of view, we've got to strategize about what happens the day after. What are we going to do regarding U.S.-Israel relations? Israel issues that will be raised during the campaign. What are we going to do after this happens? Because if annexation should come to pass, we need to both provide a space for folks to express criticism of Israel's decision without being painted as being anti-Israel, while at the same time calling out those voices who would use this opportunity to propagate anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic accusations. What Rabbi Jacob said is so important. We are saying this because we love Israel. And we need to have a space for real discussion, and again, even criticism, without being painted or marginalized or somehow, try to characterize us as being anti-Israel or anti-Zionist, which is nuts. And when there are those who say that, it weakens our ability to call out the real hostility, the real hatred, which so often again uses these tropes, these characteristics of anti-Semitism, which at ADL we look at all the time. So I think responsible leadership is going to need to create the spaces to have responsible conversations without letting it degrade into, something worse.
Great. And I wish we had more time to dig deep into this, and especially to Rabbi Jacob's response to Richard. I wish I could sort of hear back, and such an important conversation. I'm going to close, but Sheila, you kind of started us off on what responsible leadership looks like, but I didn't circle back to you. Is there anything you wanted to kind of add as closing words? And then I'll thank everyone for your time.
Sure, just to be quick, I agree with Richard around telling the full picture around education and complexity. And I think just because the Palestinians haven't accepted or shown up fully for a peace process previously, which is important to talk about, doesn't mean that Israel should unilaterally impose Israeli sovereignty over the Palestinian people and territory in the West Bank. It's clearly a step away from a two-state vision we hold of Palestinian and Israeli peoples living side by side in security and cooperation, and it moves us towards the formalization of two separate and unequal legal systems. And so clearly the peace process isn't easy. If it was, we'd be there already, but unilateral annexation is not the answer. And Jewish leaders, and I'm proud of all of us today in sharing what we've shared today, but everybody should continue to speak up for what we know is right and share how speaking up and out is actually synonymous with us loving and supporting Israel.
Thank you.
And
Great.
just quickly, just so there's no misunderstanding of what I had said, I do compliment Rick and the reform movement for what it does with young people. I don't think enough young people are exposed to those kind of programs, but I am aware with what they do, and they do an outstanding job with educating young people. I just wish that it was spread much broader throughout our community.
Yeah, thank you. And you've so powerfully emphasized how important education is and some of the other important elements of responsible leadership that we've heard just now: courage, speaking out, innovation. Very important what Jonathan called out in terms of really thinking about the day after, and should that come, and how we prepare for that. So I can't thank you enough for coming together and sharing this short but really rich conversation with me and with our audience. Really appreciate it.